Shirley, good to see you.
Hello.
Tell us about how you become a Christian.
I will, but as some of it is not very happy, I'm just going to start with a small Bible verse, Isaiah 42, verse 3.
Okay.
A bruised reed he will not break, and a smouldering wick he will not snuff out. In faithfulness, God will bring forth justice. So I felt I needed to share that. That might be for somebody. Isaiah 42, verse 3. So I came from not a church going background, really. My grandmother on my mother's side did faithfully go to church, and I believe she was a Christian. As a small child, I was encouraged to say my prayers. I was christened. I was given godparents, which was nice. My mother said to me when I was school age, would I like to go to Sunday school? Now, I was having really awful problems at ordinary school, state school, and which I'll discuss in a moment. So I said no. In retrospect, I probably would have loved Sunday school
Yes.
because I already had a feeling that God was there. And I have a first memory of at the age of about 3.5,
Wow.
I was sat down on a winter's afternoon in December with my mother and two of my cousins. I think their mother had gone to buy them some Christmas presents. And so mum was babysitting, and she was the daughter of an artist. And she said, I'm going to do some painting with you, and we'll make Christmas cards that you can have and give. And so we liked that idea. But as she did so, she told us the Christmas story. And every now and again, my cousins who were older chipped in and said, "Oh yes, the angel comes to Mary, and this, that, the other happens, and then at the very end, the three wise men come, and this, that, and the other." And so they knew a little bit about it. And at the end of the session, my cousin, the eldest there, Sheila, she never did come to the Lord in her life. She gave me her card. It was a picture of the Virgin Mary holding baby Jesus. She said, "Oh, you can have mine." Thank you for this session. It was nice, but she was kind of putting her coat on and getting ready to go home. And her brother Graham did become a Christian. He just carried on painting his until he finished, as did I. And it was interesting that during that session, not once did my cousins fight. And usually they did. They argued about everything. And I was stuck in the middle. And that day, the presence of God really came into our front room when my mum was telling that story. That's my first kind of feeling of God being there. And I was excited. I think it was the Wesleys who said their hearts were strangely warmed by God. I felt that as someone of 3.5. And it was more than the excitement you got if you were read a fairy story, because I thought, this is true. I knew at that age this story was true. So I knew that Jesus was a real person, which was lovely. I just mentioned school. I have had a lovely relationship with my parents. At the age of 5, I had to go to state school, as did all the children in those days. There was no homeschooling in England unless you were extremely rich and you had a governess. And I'm talking like royal family type rich, everyone went to state school. And I hated it. I was always bottom of the class. The teachers told me I was stupid all the time. I don't always pick things up straight away when I'm being taught something. The teaching methods, I feel, were not right. And I think some of those teachers were actually suffering from PTSD. They had served in the forces during World War II. They were not physically or mentally fit to be teaching young children in the way to go. And I suffered from that. And there were over 40 children in one class. They couldn't cope with that. And so me being a slow person used to get told I was stupid, this, that, and the other, and I dreaded it. I dreaded it. The only good part about my education was my private education when I had dancing lessons. And my mother, I often say, she never taught me to cook. She taught me how to tap dance. My father played with dolls. My father taught me to speak with my mouth closed because he was a stand-up comedian for part of his life and had ventriloquist dolls. And so parents meant fun and love and acceptance. School meant ridicule, not accepted. Um, I had then to do my 11 plus exam. All children over the age of 11 had to do an exam, and I passed it. And I was told that I could go to a nice state-funded arty type school in the city where we lived, and I would learn to do painting and drawing and play musical instruments, and I could have time off for dancing lessons because that was part of it, and I would do drama and this, that, and the other, but I'd also do all the normal things that you do at school. Great. Unfortunately, around that time, lots of things were going on in the north of England where we lived. The winters brought dreadful, what we called smog, more than fog, a bit like China now gets. Because of all the industrialization, you couldn't breathe in the winter. You couldn't see anything. The fog would come down, smog as they called it. If you sneezed, your handkerchief was full of, I'm going to do it now, black sooty marks. My mother had a weak chest. My father knew that he could get work back where his parents lived in Gloucestershire. And so, unbeknownst to me, they decided that I was going to, before I started secondary school, be sent to just an ordinary school in Gloucestershire because we were moving house. My little world was devastated, having been given a little bit of hope, devastation. So all through this time, I wasn't really thinking about God or anything like that. When we got to the flat that we were going to live in, the previous tenant had left an old calendar in the bedroom that became mine. And it had a biblical picture on it, picture of Jesus with his family. And I thought, oh no, this is going to be the same thing again. I'm going to be no good at this school. And anyway, I started saying my prayers every night. I would kneel in my bed, face this picture of Jesus, because I'd remembered that he was real. So that's a kind of link in the chain as well. Strangely enough, at the end of the first year, I was top of the class. And I
Wonderful.
don't know how it happened. I just think they were teaching in a way that my brain could accept. I didn't do so well a few years later on, but what I did find was in the north of England, all my family were there, my cousins, my aunts and uncles, and it's a very friendly place to live. In the south of England, it's not so friendly, so I was probably studying more because I didn't have many friends, and I didn't have the training as well in the evenings for dance and drama that I wanted and that I needed. We did have a kind of bond in our classroom because we were being pushed towards O levels and A level examinations, which were quite important. And at one point, we had a very nasty English teacher who said, "You've all got to learn this long poem for your homework tonight. And when I see you in 2 days' time, I will expect each one of you to know it by heart. And if any of you fail to recite when I ask you to stand up and say, do verse 5, do verse 6, whatever, if you get it wrong, you will have an hour's detention for the whole class." And we were just devastated. And
Yes.
I was so worried. Um, the lesson before, where we were going to have this test time, I was in the girls' cloakroom and I shut the cubicle door and I prayed for a miracle. Uh, I didn't know that the other children were even more scared than me, some of
Mm.
them, until after that lesson when a miracle did happen. God answered that prayer straight away. That teacher, not only did she never give us that test, she totally forgot. Somehow God took it out of her mind. And after the lesson ended, we all crept out of the room, went on to the next room for the next lesson. And even the big tough boys, because it was a co-educational school, they said, "What happened? Oh, wonderful!" And we were just, I didn't dare say I'd prayed. I thought that would be a bit odd. I thought this was a bit wacky. So I somehow got through O levels and A levels, and only then, because I got to the point where I didn't want to do any more ordinary school, and I said to my mum, "I'm not going to go on and do more. I need that training now that I was
Mm.
promised." And my mum and dad kind of honoured that and did pay for me to have some dance and drama lessons at a stage school. Um, but I just felt, what do I do now? Because there was no help from the government careers office either. They said, "Oh, if you want to do something like that, it's specialist. All we can suggest are the local jobs that you can go to, blah, blah, blah." So I had to make my own way, but God was good. But all through my life, I'd felt I was being pushed into doing things I shouldn't be doing. And I had started a relationship with a boy, well, a man really, he was a bit older than me, and he was controlling me. And so my real conversion back to Jesus came when I was 17, just about to become 18. And I'd had enough of this being pushed around by him. And I knew he would not follow me into a church. And I just said, "Oh, I live near a church." And I did have a grandma who used to go to church. And I think I'd like to go on Sunday. I knew he wouldn't come in with me, but he dropped me off outside. So for an hour every Sunday, I was without him. And it was bliss. Because he'd said, "When we're married, you're not going to be able to have a career anyway. You'll be locked in at home with the children." Anyway, after a couple of weeks, I was praying one morning, and this was traditional church, very high church, but I was praying after the service, and the vicar was away. The curate, the assistant vicar, he came along and said, "Hello, I've seen you here a few weeks. Most of our young people come in the evening." He didn't know that I just prayed, "Lord, I'll give that boy up if you find me some friends." So instant answer to prayer. And I went along in the evening, and it was a huge youth group, and they were lovely people. And from there, we all had Bible teaching sessions with the ministers, and we had a lovely time as well. There was coffee club, there were meals out together. We had folk music evenings and rock music evenings, and wonderful. And 70 or 80 of us, 40 of which, including me, got confirmed the following year, having been to an invitation service where we were told, "You probably think you're Christians because you're coming to church. Have you ever thought about asking Jesus into your life?" And I hadn't. So that was really how I became a Christian. And that night, after the service, I danced up and down the road. So I'm laughing here. I've got hay fever. I've got a runny eye. Excuse me. But I danced up and down the road with delight because I was just so happy. And then a couple of years after that, I received the baptism of the Holy Spirit, a real infilling,
Mm.
so that I would have power. Because a lot of people don't go to church because they don't realize there is power in the Bible, in God protecting and leading and guiding and fighting for us. As it said in that Isaiah verse, He will bring forth justice. I also learned since becoming a Christian, because I did lots of training. I'm not against teaching and learning. It was the
No.
way I was being taught at school. I went and did a course for 4 years to learn about people and how to counsel people in a Christian way and how to talk to people and run meetings. And one of the first things I discovered, the reason I'd felt pushed around all my life was because my birth had been induced by a busy midwife. You know, they used to say babies will be born when it's the right time. That's in modern medicine become, oh, we quite like to have those babies born today and those babies born tomorrow. And they induce people's births. And if you're not ready to be born, the baby feels they're being pushed out of the womb. And I was only just over 6 pounds when I was born in old weight,
Yes.
which is quite a small baby. It wasn't
Yes.
my time for another couple of weeks. And so there's things like that. If people are feeling they're being Christians are doing things they don't want to do. Hey, you've got your own life. Take control of it. Take charge of it. And I think since then, I've had several lives. I did dance professionally for a number of years. I became a journalist on a newspaper, a regular journalist. And
Right.
then I became the second press and media officer that the aid agency Tearfund had ever had. And the first person hadn't been there very long. I took that role. And we were working in 50 countries all over the world, and I got national coverage. I trained local representatives to get local coverage. Um,
Wonderful.
and I helped our missionary people overseas to learn to speak to the press and what to do if the press suddenly turned up on your doorstep. Um, you know, you're feeding these people, what's the situation? Or isn't it dangerous to be here? There are terrorists around, all that kind of thing. And sometimes they would initiate that coverage themselves, but they would always check back with me as to how to do it. And I
Yes.
could send the press release in quarter of an hour to the BBC or ITN or the other channels. Sky News, I think, was just starting up at that point in various other places. And I would get a reply because I would have a relationship with them. It meant I was on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But, you've got to do things like that sometimes. And it pays off if you want to raise money for charities. So, yeah, so I've met people I wanted to meet. I've held meetings at Parliament with MPs and ministers. I've stood on stage at the Royal Albert Hall and done the announcements for Christian concerts,
Yes.
dressed in a nice evening dress. But equally, I've got my hands dirty with the mission workers overseas and helped to raise money with the local people who were doing things like walking from Land's End to John O'Groats or those sort of things that fundraisers tend to do. So yeah, I'm now in my 70s, but I'm still with the Lord, and I think if you stick with Him, He will stick with you. Because by the age of 9, I was so battered and beaten down at school,
Yes.
I wanted to die. And then I got even lower. It wasn't a case of trying to kill myself. I'd gone to being a non-person. I was
Mm.
too depressed to even think about that.
Mm.
And my mum actually said to me once, "You used to be an outgoing little girl. You were always playing out, teaching other children to dance and this and that and the other." And I actually had to turn around and say, "Yeah, but you and Dad uprooted me. And now I don't even want to go to school every day. Can't face it. You uprooted me. I didn't know where I was. I lost my contacts. I lost my dance and drama and arts
Mm.
training,
Mm.
and they realised then what they'd done. But I mean, I forgave them, and we had to. They loved me, and they were doing what they thought was best.
Yes, of course. And Shirley, I have to say that here, I just want to, you've certainly had your ups and downs in life. And I want to pick up on one or two things that you said just briefly about negative words that were thrown at you. And I can see how the Lord has helped you with that because He's really used you in different aspects of your life. What would you say to someone who feels like they've had negativity in their life on words, maybe hurt by words, something someone has said to them, a teacher or an adult, a friend? What would you say to them, Shirley?
Everyone has talent of some kind, which God puts into us, I think, even before we're physically born, when we're conceived. And God is there. God is the God who comes to us, as He did to me in that little room when I was 3.5 at Christmas time, and at other times He's there waiting. You need to find out what you're good at,
Mm-hmm.
and a good idea is to try and take that comment or comments, stand outside yourself for a moment and look at yourself almost in the mirror and say, okay, how much of that is true?
Mm.
Okay, maybe I haven't got good dress sense, or maybe I'm not good at maths. Maybe I would make a brilliant gardener. I love going in the garden, that kind of. find out what you really love doing and see if you can't spend more time doing it. And maybe just get rid of the things in your life that you're doing that aren't productive. But maybe you're not supposed to be doing those things.
Yes. And do you feel because you went into counseling, because you'd had these hardships in your life, do you think it's helped you as a counselor?
Oh yes, but also before we were allowed to have real patients to counsel, we had to analyze ourselves,
Right.
and that was brilliant because you learn your own strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, absolutely. And then when you come to counsel somebody else, if they have had a similar problem to you can help them. You're not going to spend the entire time thinking about your own problems because you've been through them and you've dealt with them. And that is so important to look at your own strengths and weaknesses. What do I really look like? What do I really look like on the inside?
Mm.
What am I good at? What am I not good at?
Yes. And then you mentioned about you felt you were pushed into doing things.
Yeah.
Now, that can almost come across as being bullying. So, what would you say to someone who feels in their life that someone really, really pushes them? What advice would you give to them, Shirley?
Depending who it is and what it is,
Yeah.
you need to stand your ground, maybe turn around and say to them, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Maybe go and have a meeting with them with someone else present, as sort of a witness. It could be someone you know, it could be a boss, it could be lots of people, in which case, are you someone who is a bit of a mouse type person and doesn't stand up for themselves? Because in any situation, at work or at school, people will take it out on those who don't fight back. It's a natural thing humans do. It's a very sorry thing that they do and they shouldn't be doing it. But they will always do that. Even in the writings of Jane Austen, the famous female
I
writer,
do.
she showed this in a book she wrote called Emma. And there's a couple of film versions of it as
Mm.
well. Emma was a very attractive, liked person, and there was someone in her circle of friends who didn't have a lot of money, who was very shy, and who never stopped talking. But what she said in her talking was all rubbish and not interesting. And so on a particular day when they're having a picnic, this mousy type lady is saying, "Oh, I'm sure I've got nothing interesting to say," and Emma says something like, Emma says something like, "Oh, well, you usually got at least half a dozen stupid things that nobody wants to hear." And Emma's boyfriend kind of looks at her and then takes her to task. You can't say that to that poor lady, and she has to go and eventually apologise. But that kind of thing does happen. And it's good
Yes.
when a writer or a filmmaker can put that on the screen or into a book because it highlights things that do happen in everyday life. There's often a person they make fun of,
Yes.
as a group of people will make fun of. And it's not fair. We should be upbuilding one another and empowering one another.
Yes, and I think on that note, I think we'll finish there, Shirley. And just to say thank you for sharing your open and honest testimony today. And of course, as always, professional help if people need it too. So, Shirley, thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you, Shirley. That was brilliant.
Yeah, I